Hi everyone, my name is Christian, and on this video I wanted to showcase some of the examples of common patterns I've seen in multiple code bases related to automated tests. In this particular example, I'm referring to a specific pattern that's really common uh, for doing end-to-end testing or UI testing for the web or even mobile, actually. Here I'm using Java with the added on of adding the libraries related to Selenium and TestNG as a unit testing framework. So we can check this out over here. Here are the dependencies. And this is a Maven project. So we got TestNG, the WebDriver from Bonnie Garcia, which is pretty cool. Um, I'm gonna explain why later, and Selenium itself for Java. So this may vary depending on the language they're using or tools. Maybe you're using WebDriver IO. Maybe you're using the same Selenium but with Python. But in general, it doesn't really matter that much. You will have to translate some of the concepts in order to achieve the same results depending on your programming language. But in my experience, there are ways to doing it. So without further ado, let's go ahead. So in this code sample, I wanted to try to do it as bare minimum code needed to do the following test. So we're gonna be in the dev2 page. We're gonna use the search bar and we're gonna go look for a user profile page and then confirm that the URL matches it. So for this particular sample, we're gonna just go to my dev2 page and check that the URL is the one that is matching. Now, just so we can have a general idea of how this unit testing framework works, we can go ahead and start talking about the triple A's of unit tests, which is arrange, act, and also assert. So in the arrange part, just set up the objects that you're gonna use. So visually, you can take a look like about this part of the code. It's related to arranging things, making sure that we have the correct Chrome driver. We maximize the window. We initialize this other object we're gonna use later on. And this is where the Webdriver Manager comes in from the dependency we saw earlier. Now this sets up like a matching version of Chrome, of the Chrome driver to the Chrome browser itself in my local machine. That way, if we have, let's say, Chrome version 1, but the Chrome driver we have it's expecting to have Chrome version 2. It's gonna actually go lower to the so they matches both Chrome versions to version 1. You may run into this issue if you don't add this dependency, so keep that in mind. So the rest of the code is pretty simple. If we go ahead and run it, let's see if we can take a look at the browser. All right, it's running. And there we go. We get the browser, looks for my main, hits the people tab, and then here we can see the reports. Now, if we go all the way to the bottom, sorry, over here, you can see the total test was 1 and it passed. So that's all good. So this version of the code doesn't have any page object model pattern related. So I added a new branch so we can look at the wrong way of doing page object model. So if we check that out, see that the code changes a little bit, but you get the same idea. So we still have the arrange part, but now we start initializing objects that represent parts of the website. So in this case, this will be the homepage for Dev2 since we're gonna open that website. And then from the homepage, we get this search bar web element or element from the page. And then this send keys method essentially just send this string as if you were typing it in the keyboard and then press enter on the keyboard. Or simulates the same action as a regular user. Then we have to also initiate another page since we want to keep our elements from the page separated from each other. So whenever we have to change the IDs or the locator in general, we can do it in just a single, like we have a single place of truth, I think is the right expressions to use. So in the third page, we do something similar. We have a getter method which returns the web element in that page, and then we click on it. Then we do the same for the author link. We click on it, and then we initiate another page, uh, which represents the author page. And then I added this particular method, which just checks that the URL has the at the end of the URL we have this word. In this case, my ID for my profile. And then we just make sure to close all the tabs on the browser itself. So if we run it, you're gonna see that we get pretty much the same results. We go. That's gonna open Chrome. Let's give it a few seconds. There you go. And done. It finished. And here we have the same results. There we go. Okay, so now that you have somewhat of an idea of how the code looks, in terms of the structure, if you open up the panel on the left, you're gonna see that my project has the source main folder, and then we have the main. We're gonna have just a package for the pages, each particular one. The overall structure is that every single page it's inheriting from the base class, which is just the plain page, which just serves to initialize the driver and then also the WebDriver wait, which I'm gonna explain later. To wait for the elements for at least 5 seconds before throwing an exception, which will be no such element on the page if the, let's say, the locator or the ID that we use doesn't exist at the moment of the code being executed. So let's say we want to check out the home page, which is the first one we're gonna use. It has a getter where we set the search bar web element property to the value of the get the weight from the super class, and then we use the until method to pass in a expected conditions that wait for the element to be clickable, and then look for it by the name of queue. It's just that's in the HTML code of the page, so you don't have to really worry about that. And then we return it. So you will see something similar in the other pages over here. Let me close this panel on the left because this line of code is quite long, right? Now we have the same pattern. We wait for the element until it's clickable, and then we send it back to the consumer of this class. Same thing for the author, although it's a bit different since it returns a boolean value. So that this is the part I mentioned before. So the who will be my username. It will be concatenated at the end of the URL. So if we go to the test folder, let me close this. Then we just have this test file that we were looking at the first place. So in order to improve this, let me switch to another branch, which is the right way. And we still have the same code. So I'm gonna go step by step, doing changes, refactoring this code, so we can make it cleaner, and actually follow some of the best practices that I've gathered through many posts on the web. You can find some of the documentation related to this actually in the official Selenium website. But if you have some ideas of how to work with object-oriented programming languages, then most of this should be things that you're already familiar with. So the first thing that we're gonna do is that um, this let me see, right. So the first thing we can notice is that we're using this suffix for each object that inherits from page, but by doing a quick glance, you can see that this page actually inherits from the base page. So this naming convention is not really that necessary. So let's do a rename on this and take this off. Now the IDE is gonna let me know that there are a couple of instances where we use a local variable, so we want to also update that. And then if we go to the search page, we want to do the same, rename, remove the page bar, make sure we have the checked in, and then we also need the author page to be renamed. Rename, we take that. Now, if we will go back to the test file, look at the code. It doesn't really change that much, but now we have a bit of less repetition of the same words over and over. And actually, the code doesn't really miss its meaning. It shouldn't throw you off if you see this. Now, a couple of things that is happening in terms of the logic is that the test code knows too much about how things are gonna be done, and in a way we can consider this to be a misuse of the encapsulation part of object-oriented programming. So we don't want that to happen. We want these logical steps or instructions like clicking and sending text to an element to be part of our internal object logic. And the benefits of doing this is that we're gonna be able to make our page classes. So when I'm saying page classes, I'm referring to the home, the search, and the authors to have um, to to be act as a layer, so that when we need to change anything, let's say in the future, we don't really want to use Selenium. Let's say Selenium has a really critical bug that's preventing us from actually getting things done in our work. Then we can change that and actually use any other dependencies or external libraries or frameworks without really impacting our testing code. So that's the main point of doing this change. So now, how does that look? Then we will need to refactor a couple of things. The first thing I would do is to go into the open page and refactor how this method works. So if we jump into the code implementation, we can see that this is actually using the driver directly, but it's in the page class. Now, this driver is being passed on through the constructor that is giving us from our, let's say, child page up to our base page. So the only problem I have, which is not really that, let's say, critical, but my only problem with this is that since this is a public method, this is also being this is also available for every other page. So we go search and then type in open, you can see I'm able to use this method. But in order to get to the search page, I don't want to really open that page. I don't really need right now to be able to open any page. And furthermore, we can even say that this URL string is actually implementation details of the page class. So we should actually make this something internal and that no other programmer uh, could mess up. Maybe they put a typo, they commit the code, they push it, and nobody really notices because it's not really creating any merge conflicts, but that can lead to unexpected results. So in order to refactor this, I will first take off this method entirely, and then we will need to go to the home page, and now we need to add that over here. We say public void open, And then at this time, we're not gonna add a URL. We're gonna go ahead and just place it here. We can maybe do set up like in the global scope a string that's gonna be like URL, so it ends up being what you call a constant. But then this URL constant is not gonna really be used by any other methods inside our class. So we should actually inline it. So if we take the private part from it, then we can go ahead and use the driver. Now, for this class in particular, I don't really have the driver reference directly, but I do the get driver from the parent class. So it will actually be something like this, and that will give us our result. But notice how the URL it's being used directly in just one place. So we can improve this even a little bit more by inlining the value in it. So we can do this and get rid of this because we're not really using it in any other place. So we keep it really simple and straight to the point. Now another leaking, let's say, of implementation details is this get driver function, because if we go into the code, we can see, sorry about that, we can see that this is also a public method. So in a way, we could change this access modifier. If we do it to private, it's not gonna allow us. Look how the IDE is telling me there's a problem. But if we do protected, then it's gonna be available to any of our existing child classes. But I will actually change this so that we have the actual field to be protected. And that way we can access it just like this. I don't actually need to use not even the this keyword, so I can access that directly. Since and this shouldn't be you shouldn't be scared of doing this, because you may think that the driver might be null, but at the time the constructor is gonna be executed first, and it's gonna be setting that value here. Now, in order to prevent any null values, we could probably add a null check over here. So we have it's null. We can then throw an illegal argument exception and then put some friendly message like the driver cannot be null. Please provide a valid reference. This could be the case. This is throwing. Oh, sorry, I need the new keyword. There we go. We can take these braces and then let's just put a little space between them just to separate them. So this way we're not gonna get the driver to be null, and we're not gonna allow the wave also to try to be set to a null to have a null reference while we are creating this object. So that's good. Now, if we go back to our home page, it will still have an issue, which is that this method no longer takes this parameter. So if we get rid of it, there you go. Now we got a little clean up. So my changes was to make the page itself have all the things they need inside of them. That way we have as little as input from the outside as possible. Now, in order to refactor then this part of the code, I will go ahead and do as follows. I will then have a method to be searched for, or it can be named something different. Then I can add that query over here. Let's take this out. You don't need them. Now notice how this method is in red. It doesn't actually exist, But if I go ahead and use my IDE intelligence, I can then create that, and we can select on which class we want, or on the parent class or the child class. So in order to keep things as simple as possible and have less side effects in the future, we want to keep it in the lowest scope as possible. So let's do it here in the home page. We keep the return value as void. We keep the same string value. Now we change this to something more generic. So we can call it query. Now the implementation for this will be that now that I'm inside the home class, I have access directly to the search bar web element. So now if I wanna do that send keys bar, I can do it right here. So in a way, I no longer need this getter method. So let me get this part of the code and paste it over here. Oops. Now I can get rid of this entire getter. So this is gonna bring some issues because we still need to do a few things. Now that we have the search bar, we send the keys. Now we're gonna add that query, and also internally we're gonna have access to the keys enter key to like press enter on the keyboard. So now that's great. Look how now this line of the code is no longer applicable. So we can get rid of it. Now just for this part, we can see how we're changing our mindset in a way while we're programming. Instead of giving out for free, let's say, the access for the consumer of our homepage, like we're doing on the search in the author, and then giving them the option to do anything that is not, let's say, valid for our test. Instead of clicking, they can do send keys, they can clear it, they can do all sorts of things. But now that we are encapsulating our code in our home page, you can see the only methods that they really have is whatever we inherited from our base class, and the actual methods that we implemented, as well as the methods related to like the generic object class that every class inherits from. So now we can start going ahead and do more cleanup, right? There was a click here. So let's do the same for the search class. Now, if we go inside the code, we can see it's the common pattern, right? Things are repeating themselves. So instead of doing another method, let's go ahead and rename this. So it can be, let's say, so let me start thinking a little bit. Now I could go ahead and make this method just do one simple action, and it can even be renamed like click people filter. But then that's still revealing quite a bit of implementation details. So our test shouldn't really uh, even tell what's gonna happen directly. Now, what is the action that we're doing on the page? If you really think about it, we are selecting a author. So we say select author, and now for this we're gonna need then we don't need any parameters for now, so let's keep it that way. So we can go ahead and let's do a quick check. So for the author, we need to click on this people filter. Let's click on there. We can change the return type to void. So this is gonna give us trouble. Let's remove it. Then we need this author link as well. And we're gonna do the same. We're gonna click on the author. There we go. So we can even get rid of this method. So when you go back, look how now our code is even shorter, and it didn't really miss any of our meaningful information. So if we go from the top to bottom, we say, okay, we go to the home page, we open the page, we search for this particular query on there, Now we didn't say that search for in the search bar or something like that. We don't really have to be that much specific. That's internal details, right? Now we had to create this search then object, and then we can select our author. So following the same thing, we need to create an author page, and then we check if the author is Chris Baskin, which is my user. So now our code is looking a lot cleaner. Now there are a few things we can still do to better improve our code. Now for the page object model pattern, if we want to really like implement it uh, in a very let's say maintainable way and make our tests like speak from themselves, we can do the following. We can return uh, we can either return primitive values, so that means booleans, text, or any specific state of an element on the page, like if it's displayed or not. That's a really common used. So other than that, which you're gonna probably find this in a lot of code bases, but another use is to return other page object models. So that's where it gets a little tricky for most people. But let's see how it looks in action. So when we're doing these steps in a specific, searching for something, the whole page changes a little bit. There's a lot more elements in the page that are related to the search. So this actually belongs to the search page. So we can do the following. We can move, let's say we duplicate this code. I'm gonna cut it and then place it over here. Now notice how the IDE is complaining that this code is not really gonna run. Like our search for method actually returns void. So the only thing we're gonna do is to change the return type of that method with the help of our IDE to be a actual search object. Now notice how it doesn't really know how to do it. So what it's gonna do is return null, and this is gonna give us a uh, null pointer exception. So it's a really easy way to just prevent this is by returning a search object. And we take the same driver that we have access to from our parent class and we pass it in the constructor. So look how now this line of code prevents us from having to use this one. Look how nice that's looking now. So when we go ahead and start our test, we only need to uh, initialize the first page, but then as we go and we start doing more actions, those same actions not only act upon the website as a regular user, like clicking and typing, uh, they also lead us into the next page that we're gonna use. This way we still have our web elements in different pages, like the search page and the home page, but it makes our testing code a little more, let's say, fluid or easier to maintain. So we can follow our train of thought. That way, we're not having to like keep in mind that we need to create another object to follow up into other instructions. So in that same node, we can do the same here. We can even make the select author to return that author page that we need. So let's create this. Let's notice how now the return type is author. So we change this to author and then give them the driver. And here we go. Look how nice that is. So look how now, since we have done this refactoring, uh, these our three A's are now uh, a little more clear in our code. So we have the arrange part over here in the top. We have the act, and then we also have the assert. Now there's a couple more things we can improve in this code. Notice how whenever I do the assertion, I also quit. But if there's anything going wrong in whatever step we did, either in the arrange part, home, or even the assertion, then this line of code is not gonna even be executed. So we need to add another method which comes from our testing class, which is the tear down. So if we move this method to the bottom, then we can make sure that the driver gets quitted. So if we paste this line over here, now notice how we don't have access to any driver reference. So we're gonna have to make use of another method, the setup method, and this is gonna be all the way on the top, which is gonna be initiating that value. So we will need to move this line over here, and then also have a reference in the global scope for the WebDriver. So we set it to driver. Now here we just need to remove this part. So now notice how even the color of the driver object changed, because we're referring to the same one in the global scope, which is a property now from our class. Now this driver is gonna be able to be passed on into our objects, and look how the only constructor in our test is this one and not the other ones. They're being executed under the hood. Now the most important part of this is that the code actually runs the same way that we did before. So in order to do that, let's also move this part of the code over here, because it needs to be the Chrome driver needs to be set up before we create a Chrome driver object, because that's gonna open the browser. And we also can notice that this maximize of the window can also be reused in other tests in the future. So look how we don't even need the arrange part now. So, well, in a way we can say the arrange is now changed to be this part, and then this can be the act. That's totally fine. But I will keep this home reference in this scope, because we don't have any other tests. So if we were to add more tests, they have to first have a reference to a home page, then I will move it to the setup. So let's go ahead and run it just to confirm that I'm not crazy and that we can actually verify that it runs. Let's see, open up the browser, search on the page, click on people, and done. There we go. Let me expand this, and here we have our test results. One test was run and it passed. So with this, I hope I can help many people out there that probably could make use of this. I know um, I have a inside joke between me and my friends that most people who are in the QA field that do automated tests are QAs because they don't really like to be programmers. So in the first place, a couple of these topics can be strange at first, but once you get some practice with it, you will see how much it improves your code base and your tasks overall. So without any further ado, uh, I would like to thank you for your time, and I'll probably see you in the next one.